have a book like this, or a book like The Zero, or like Butler's book, so you know you're going to publish it. In this case, you have an absolutely stunning cover on the book as well. You go through a process internally. Do you think you work harder than most internally to sell your books within the publishing house? And then what happens between author and editor as you were trying to get the book out there? You were talking a little bit about the extra things you're doing for your book tour, and I know, Cal, you spend a lot of time on Twitter and Facebook and in every way you possibly can, networking to make sure that the books by your authors are out in the world and that people are really knowing about them. Do you work together on that, or are you each separately doing your work to do that?
I have to kid myself that it's not promotion, or I don't really like to do it. So I go speak to colleges that ask me, and I try, every once in a while, like I did Facebook, that I had some readings in New York just because I was terrified nobody would be there. But so terror, I can do it. Greed, I can't Twitter or Facebook. And I know it's a huge part of publishing now, and I know some younger authors who talk about the platform they're building. I've got this platform, which seems great, but I think of a writer like Don DeLillo, and I hope that if Don DeLillo came of age now with his reticence and his reclusiveness, that he wouldn't have to be on Twitter 15 times a day promoting himself. I think great books find readers because they're great, and it's a slower, more patient process than our culture is built for. And so it's great that it's great when a good publicist is able to get your book out there. It's the greatest thing in the world. But for me, it's one of the more difficult parts of the whole process is figuring out how to go out and sell those things, because I'm certainly proud of it, but I'll burst into flame if I go around telling people it's the greatest book ever. So I'm not, that balance is always difficult, and it's the great thing about having a supportive house like Harper Collins and Harper Perennial and Harper, having them push the book in a way that I don't feel like I'm out there selling them door to door.
And how about you? That's really changed for you, I imagine, in the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, I'm more of a shameless Twitterer, I think, than Jess is, and the reason that I like it is that I'm inherently a shy person, but I can write 140 characters, in my sleep. I really enjoy either sort of writing a few words about something that I really love, or sharing the words of others who have done that. And a lot of Facebooking and especially Twitter, that's probably is just reposting. It's just sharing and passing along conversation that you've had. And in a sense, I think it's actually kind of a revolution in publishing, because publishing has always been about readers, editors who are effectively sort of readers and fans, finding a way to magnify that fandom through the big machine, the big megaphone of the publisher, and finding all of these people to sort of be your friends and listen to you, and that's why social media sort of naturally, to my mind, sort of lends to something. It has a lot of excesses, and it does have some sort of downsides, including the fact that a good friend of mine who's an agent the other day told me she just about has decided to unfollow me on Twitter because she can't stand listening to me one more day about this book. But the truth is, it is a way for us all to talk about our love of books directly to readers. And until the past 5 years, there was a very linear mechanics to the way publishing worked, where the editor and author worked directly, and then it was almost a kind of a bucket brigade, where we would kind of put all that love into a bucket and hand it to the salespeople, and hand another full bucket to the publicity people, and all these other departments in-house. We have to bring it to the art departments so that they would create a cover that they would love as much as we love it. And then those buckets go out, with a little bit spilled off the sides, go out a little further to the bookstores and to the reviewers at the newspapers. And it's not until they are carrying those buckets that the consumers, the readers, the people we're trying to reach actually hear about it. Now we're in a completely different situation where we're actually able, as editors, as the sort of first advocates for the book, to talk directly to readers, but also to talk directly and to forge real relationships with bookstores, with reviewers, with book bloggers, which is an entire fifth limb that didn't exist a few years ago. And not just this sort of access, but the trust and the shared references that have grown up, that we've seen grown up among us all, has made, I think, a kind of book community that just honestly didn't exist a few years ago. It's not, I mean, that sounds like a fairy tale, and I don't need to,
but I do think, I appreciate how organic all of that seems. It's always organic until I get on and try to post something. And then this writer friend who keeps writing things like, anybody know any good restaurants in Houston? I've been assigned by a major magazine to go do a profile there. And then everybody's like, oh, what's the profile? You know, what's the magazine? Oh, really? Okay, it's this. You know? And that, I always feel coy like that. You know? And so, but when I see, I do think there is an organic, you know, the great thing about it is, and even old-fashioned email, people who love books can find you and find the books they want.
Well, I have a lot more questions, and I'm sure people in the audience have questions, so I wanted to open it up to take your questions, if you have anything to tell or for Jess. Yes?
Yeah, this one. When you said you took your book and you had these different problems and you kind of put it away and decided it was bad and all that, and then when you went back to it and said, I sanded it and stripped the paint, what is that like exactly in terms of, are you looking at it mechanically, saying what didn't work, the idea, I still believe in this idea.
Right.
So I'm going back and saying, why didn't this idea work? Or are you just reading it like a reader and saying, this sucks, this chapter sucks, but this one's good? I mean, what's your relationship to
A
it?
little bit of both. One thing I've learned is that I used to think time away from something meant that it would die. And now I'm realizing that time away can be the best thing. When I go back to it now, all of a sudden I think, well, that never worked. What was I thinking? And I don't know if that's right or not, but it's at least there, I'm sure of that response. Whereas when you get to a point where you're just not sure, you know, we're talking about I'm trying to put together this story collection, and whatever anyone tells me, the last thing they tell me seems right. Yeah, that should be the title. That should be the order. You're absolutely right, because I have no opinion.
Right.
And I'll always write to a point in a novel where it's not that I necessarily can't keep going. I just honestly don't know, you know. And so I got to that point when I went back to it. The process itself, I'm very much. If there's a problem in a sentence above where I'm writing, I can't go on until I fix that sentence. And I read everything aloud. So I'll start at the beginning, and I'll start with, you know, the dying actress arrived in his village the only way one could arrive directly. And I'll say, okay, that sounds fine, you know. And I'll comb all the way through until I get to the thing that's hanging me up. And I'll do the same thing structurally. When I made that long outline, it was only about a third of those ideas worked. But I had enough distance from it, and I stepped away from it, that I could sort of envision what it should do. And I tend to see story not as a collection of this happened and that happened, but as shape. So when I describe the end of the book as, I really imagined this whole book, I was going to carry this collection of characters around, and I was going to be so gentle with them, and then at the end I was going to just throw them on the table and say, here they all were. You know, and that was the shape of the novel for me. It was a kind of, you know, like a roller coaster. Oh, I'm holding on to them, and then at the end, I would show them all. You know, and you know, other novels, The Financial Lives of the Poets was just a descent to me. You know, a guy, it's that part of the roller coaster. You come up to the very top, and when you meet him, it's just that. And so the novel takes place over 4 days, and it just shoots out. And so for me, there's a kind of shape that I see when I'm stepped away from it, I'm writing that long form, and then it's just word by word, sentence by sentence, trying to make all those things. And the reason a writing journal is so key for me is I can do the long and the short at the same time. I can talk about the smallest thing, like you know, a character's name. This doesn't seem like the right name, you know, or you know, a car somebody drives, and then the larger things. You know, I'm losing track of this character through this section. So yeah, it was going back to the very beginning, starting over, probably read for a month, and rewrote sentences. And while I did that, was working the whole time on where the book should go. Because it has so many different voices, there were parts that just never worked. And there were parts that were long and indulgent that I knew I would have to trim and shrink.
So a little more of a business head kind of to it.
What's that?
A little more business-like head the second time.
Yeah, I'm really obsessive. When I'm in the middle of a novel, I'm just carrying that around. I'm at my desk every day, 7 days a week, 5:30 in the morning, and I write until my coffee's gone. And then if it's going well, I'm sort of a binge writer, so I might just keep going and going. And then I'll wander around all day trying to piece together where everything's gone. And but in the afternoon when I'm away from it is when I can make, when I can be more businesslike,
right,
and be, hopefully make those larger decisions.
Yeah, you're gonna say
Well, I was just going to say that one of the other things that I know that Jess, at least at times in sort of the course of his career writing novels, has done is you are somebody who writes more than one thing at once, or toggles back and forth between different novels, and sometimes there's a degree, I think, of reaction between two different kinds of books you're writing that may help both. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I quit my newspaper job, I was so terrified that someone was going to come back in and drag me by the scruff of the neck back to work that, and so I would get writer's block. And I remember it shows up all the time. I just love that show, but every day at 10 o'clock, my wife would go to work, and every day at 10 o'clock, the Rockford Files would come on. And I'd be writing, I'd be like, I want to go watch the Rockford Files. And I'd go watch the Rockford Files, and I would just be filled with self-loathing. Jim and Angel had a really tough case today. So I realized if I got up from the desk to watch the Rockford Files every day, I was not going to ever do this. And so, and then that brought me to the problem of writer's block and what to do when you're stuck. And I thought, well, if I don't leave the desk, then I better just work on something else. And I didn't even know if that was possible, but it's become the way I work. And so the whole time I was writing The Zero, I would tinker on Beautiful Ruins, and I was writing short stories, and I write essays, and I would break off and start writing poems, which is how the poetry, I shouldn't make quote marks, the poetry and the financial lives of the poets came about. I write scripts, and if I'm stuck on something, then I really trust the time away now. I trust it almost more than I trust staring at the screen. I trust it more than I trust staring at the screen, expecting something will come. But if I'm not going to work on that, I've got to work on something else. And as Cal said, a lot of times what I write next would be a reaction to that. This was so big and elaborate, so many different voices, that the financial lives of the poets takes place in 4 days with one character. And that was just a reaction to hating this so much.
Before you take the question, I just want to mention, I've heard so many writers describe the shape of a book, but I've never heard a writer describe it as accurately as you just described the shape of this book. The way this book unfolds, holding those characters in your hand and then them spilling out on the table, is exactly what unfolds and unfolds so beautifully in the end of this book. So I urge you all to really read it. Just that explanation of how the book works intrigued you, it is there then, present in the book, absolutely.
Two questions. Do you read other novels or nonfiction while you're writing? And also, did you begin this book with an outline, and do you begin most of your novels with outlines and then restructure?
I didn't begin this one with an outline, or the other failed novel I was writing at the time with an outline. And that's why I wrote Over Tumbled Graves, my crime novel, with an outline, because I thought you appear to be an outliner, because they just went off into thin air. And I'm sorry, the other question was...
do you read other novels or nonfiction?
I do. I read all the time, and I'm constantly inspired by the writers, and I think we're all trying to cause in other readers the effects that writers have caused in us. I remember reading Cloud Atlas at some point and being so amazed by that structure, by that Russian nesting doll structure. And it was right around the time I was struggling with Beautiful Ruins and thinking, oh, the answer is in structure. I just need to find my way back into there. When I read, I was well into the novel when I started hearing about Jennifer Egan's Visit from the Goon Squad, and I did not read because I don't, once I'm into something, I don't want to read something really close to it. When I was writing The Zero, there weren't very many 9/11 novels. In fact, I don't know that there were any as I was writing it, but I would have avoided them because I wouldn't want to either be clouded with their vision of things. But I read all the nonfiction I could get my hands on. I research. I love research. I love immersing myself in research just so I feel sure enough to write, which I think is the most important part.
We have time for one more question.
You mentioned that the original title was Hotel Adequate View. At what point in the process did it change to Beautiful Rooms?
I think that was in about 2009 or 2010. I decided Richard Burton needed to be in the novel, and was doing all this great Richard Burton research. And I found this New Yorker article in which he's described in his 50s as a beautiful ruin. And it was, I had not a lot of lightning bolts as I was writing, but all of a sudden it seemed like that's what my whole book was about. And I went back and I was stunned how many times I used the word ruin or artifact. And because it was built of all these different kinds of writing, the writing itself was like artifacts, little bits that combined to make the whole. And the characters seemed like beautiful ruins. And yeah, that just felt like exactly the right thing. And Cal is great at deflecting bad ideas when I offer them to him. And I talked about my inability to publish short stories, and so I would send short stories that even after I was publishing novels, I could not get a short story published. I have one of my other great editors, Amy Lloyd, who was at Playboy and now is at Byliner, took one of my first stories. But before that, I sent Cal this brilliant idea. I'll take all my rejected short stories, and the best of the rejected short stories was called Sex Talk, in which a drunk father gives his 8-year-old son a sex talk that's more like stereo instructions. And so I sent Cal the manuscript for Sex Talk and Other Rejected Stories. And the blurbs were going to be the notes from all the rejections. And one of the brilliant things Cal does is ignore my really bad suggestions. And I remember telling him when I was working on the novel, it's called The Hotel Adequate View. And he'd say, how are the kids? So when I found that title, it's not like the structure. It's one of those things that is such a fortunate accident because it opens up the book in this way you never